Well, you bring up a good point, right? Because if we're trying to bring this down to, let's say, a mom and pop level, talk to me about your typical person who are using these things, right? I can imagine, okay, cost segregation is relative. Maybe you've got a much wider spectrum of people who utilize that. But looking at 179D and 45L, who's using it? I mean, are we talking these mega hedge fund builders and massive people, your most sophisticated developers? Or are there some small shops that have realized the potential of this and are using it to their advantage?
Well, okay, so there's one thing I didn't tell you about 179D. There's a secret that I didn't tell you, but I'll answer that first question too, and then I'll tell you this is the secret area where a lot of people are using it. So what I see for people that own their own properties, I see it just manufacturers is what I see are the most user, potential taxpayers that are going for that because they have a lot of square footage. So when you think about an Amazon warehouse, something like that, the more square footage, the better.
So you're industrial folk. You're talking industrial style. Yeah.
That's where a lot of the 179D is. Now, some people are grabbing it when they're doing their lighting retrofits, but you really need at least 50,000, if not 75,000 square feet to make it worthwhile. But the secret area is, and so we didn't talk about this, is the government has also realized that there's a lot of government buildings out there when you talk about jails and schools and universities and all these things. And so they also want them to be energy efficient. Well, they don't pay tax, so they don't really care about a deduction. So what they've given you in the 179D is that they allow the designer or the architect of those buildings to take the deduction. It has to be transferred so that governmental entity historically has to sign on paper. Yes, you can have it. They didn't need it anyway. And so they get to take it. It's a fake deduction because the architect and the designer didn't have to pay for it. And so there are a lot of architectural firms out there that they make bank on taking this deduction that doesn't actually exist for them. I have talked to firms and that what they do is based on how much of a deduction they get, how much that reduces their tax this year, they calculate that and they pass that out as bonus to all their employees.
Interesting. So we're talking about if you are designing from the architectural, the professional design perspective of a government building for the government, that's got to create some competition, I would imagine, then of maybe lowering some bids and things like that as far as offering design plans. I would imagine that's part of that game.
It has gone there. That was not the intent of Congress. But it definitely has gone there, but that's a balancing act for sure.
Well, Dawn, I always say the market will dictate. That's
the market will dictate. And so that has been historically just a landslide. And now going forward in 2023, because we've got so many changes in this Inflation Reduction Act, they have now opened that up to any nonprofit. So if you're a church, if you're a private university, if you are just a 501c business, nonprofit, and you're building a building, your architect or designer can have that deduction. So that is going to open it up. I already have architect firms calling me now that want to talk about this who hadn't taken it before, that do a lot of work in that space.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that. So I am on the board of a nonprofit, a 501c3 called the Hope House here. It's based in Huntersville, North Carolina. It is a transitional homeless shelter for women and children. And we have begun developing cottages for part of our transitional living to help people get acclimated to the real world by themselves. We don't take a housing first approach of just stick people in hotels and stick people in houses because we believe in the necessity of life skills, right? Like when I went off to college and I was coming home still to ask my mom to do my laundry, right? That was because I didn't have that skill yet. And then it wasn't until I got married that I was finally taught that skill. And sorry, Mom. No, and she taught me, but I just didn't listen as much then, right? I don't know. Different conversation. I'm already putting my foot in my mouth too much right now, Dawn, but I'm going to back up a little bit. But the point being, okay, so we work with some architects. So this is good to know when we're talking with our business partners in the sense of, or sponsor partners, donors, right? That want to help facilitate and provide a good thing to the community where they reduce their price for us, but this is a way for them to earn back too. And that's phenomenal. That's great. So I'm very grateful that, thank you. See, this is Dawn, this is why you're the best. You see, you're giving me stuff I didn't even ask for.
Thank you, Justin.
And now I'm going to go back to my next board meeting and I'm going to look real good whenever I do this. So I appreciate that.